When you think about the giants of 20th century science, there's one man whose brilliant mind was matched only by his fiercely independent and, yeah, often controversial character. Today, we're going to dive into the life and legacy of the one and only Sir C.V.Raman. Okay, here's a question you've probably asked since you were a kid. Why is the sea blue? And the answer you always get is, oh, it just reflects the blue sky. Simple, right? But what if I told you that's not the whole story? What if the water itself is playing a much bigger, more active role?
Let's go back to 1921. Picture this. A passenger on a ship, the SS Narkunda, just refuses to accept that simple answer. His curiosity wouldn't just rewrite our entire understanding of light, it would also earn him a Nobel Prize, the very first one in science for anyone from Asia. A huge deal.
So, to really get a handle on this incredible figure, we're going to break it down into 5 parts. We'll start with that fateful voyage, then look at his very unusual path into science, the breakthrough discovery itself, his mission to build up India's scientific institutions, and finally, we'll get into the complicated legacy of the man himself.
All right, let's dive right in and start where he did, on the deck of a ship staring out into the deep blue of the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay, so at the time, everyone just went with what the great Lord Rayleigh said, that the sea's color was nothing more than a mirror for the sky. But Raman, he wasn't buying it. So right there on the ship, he pulls out a nifty little tool called a nickel prism. Think of it like a pair of super-powered polarized sunglasses. And what he saw was mind-blowing. When he used it to block the reflection from the sky, the sea didn't get less blue, it got more blue, a more brilliant, intense blue. And there was only one possible conclusion. The water molecules themselves had to be scattering the light.
Now, you might be wondering, who was this guy to just up and challenge a scientific giant like Lord Rayleigh? Well, that's because Raman was no ordinary thinker, and believe me, his path to becoming a scientist was anything but ordinary.
And when I say prodigy, I mean it. Get this, he passed his high school exams at just 11 years old, earned his BA at 16, top of his class, and by 18, while he was still a student, he'd already published his first scientific paper in a major British journal. I mean, come on, that's just unreal.
So the obvious next step for a mind like this was to head to England to study, right? But then his life takes this totally unexpected detour. A medical inspection concluded he was just too frail. A doctor literally wrote him off, saying he wouldn't be able to withstand the harsh weathers of England. Can you imagine? Just like that, the traditional path to a career in science was slammed shut.
So, forget about a lab coat in Cambridge. Ramana ends up behind a desk in Calcutta, working as an accountant for the government's finance department. Seriously? But you just can't keep a mind like that down. By day, he's balancing ledgers. But by night, and on his own time, he would head over to the Indian Association for the Cultivation of Science and conduct his own, independent research, as he later said, at very unusual hours.
And it was that incredible drive, that after-hours passion, that would ultimately lead him from wondering about the blue sea to discovering something that would change physics forever.
This is where we get to his masterpiece, the Raman effect. To put it simply, when light shines through something transparent, like water or glass, a tiny, tiny fraction of that light gets scattered and actually changes color. And here's the magic part. That change is completely unique to the molecules it hits. It's like a molecular fingerprint. It lets us identify what something is made of with incredible accuracy.
So how did he find it? Well, it was a classic case of brilliant scientific detective work. He was inspired by another discovery, the Compton effect, but that used X-rays. Raman was convinced there had to be an equivalent for regular light. He and his amazing student, K.S. Krishnan, noticed this super faint, kind of weird glow in their liquid samples. And then, on February 28, 1928, a day that's now celebrated as India's National Science Day, they finally isolated it and proved it was a brand new kind of scattered light.
You know, this whole thing was driven by just supreme, unwavering confidence. Way back in 1924, years before the big discovery, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. Someone asked him what he was aiming for next. His answer? Just 4 words. The Nobel Prize, of course.
And no, he wasn't kidding. This is my favorite part. He was so absolutely sure he was going to win the 1930 Nobel Prize for this discovery that he booked boat tickets for himself and his wife to go to Stockholm in July. The announcement wasn't until November. I mean, who does that? That's an unreal level of self-belief. Okay, so he's got the Nobel. He could have written his own ticket to any university, any lab, anywhere in the world. But instead, he turned his focus back home, dedicating himself to building a world-class science ecosystem right there in India.
And his impact was huge. He became the very first Indian director of the prestigious Indian Institute of Science. He founded the Indian Academy of Sciences. When India gained its independence, he was named the country's first national professor. And when he retired, he used his own money to build the Raman Research Institute, and he worked there right up until his final days. He wasn't just a scientist, he was an institution builder, a nation builder for Indian science.
But, this story isn't just about triumphs and trophies. The picture is, well, it's a lot more complicated than that. Because for all his genius, Raman was also a very difficult, often divisive man, and his legacy is marked by some pretty intense controversies.
Let's look at 3 big areas of conflict. First, there's the Nobel Prize itself. K.S. Krishnan, who was absolutely central to the discovery, was never nominated for the prize. Then you've got his famous feud with another Nobel winner, Max Born, a bitter scientific debate that went on for decades. And finally, his relationship with the government was hostile, to say the least. He hated bureaucracy in science, which put him at odds with Prime Minister Nehru. The story goes he even smashed his Bharat Ratna, India's highest honor, with a hammer.
And this is a tough one to talk about, but it's crucial. His attitude towards women in science. When a brilliant woman named Kamala Sohani applied to the Indian Institute of Science, he just flat out rejected her, basically saying women weren't cut out for research. It was only after she literally staged a protest that he finally, reluctantly, let her in. Her words, right here, they're a pretty powerful indictment of his views.
So that's what we're left with, isn't it? This incredibly complex picture. On one hand, you have this singular genius who gave us a new way to see the universe and helped build a scientific nation. But on the other, you have a legacy of conflict and deeply troubling biases. So the question for us is, how do we hold both of those truths at the same time? How do we celebrate the brilliant light someone brings to the world without turning a blind eye to the shadows they cast?